Hello, and thank you for tuning to Neptune Knives. A lot of people compare a Sage 2, which is the knife you see here on the left, to a Chris Reeves small Sebenza. For Sebenzas, the main debate is Sebenza worth it? And what it really comes down to is the manufacturing of not only how detailed it is, how perfect the measurements, each screw size to everything on a Sebenza, but also some of the little added features that you don't see when the knife is just sitting there on display. And so we can compare, for example, the Sage 2. First, a Chris Reeve knife. Here, this is the lock side. Here's the frame side. Okay, all the screws are females and males. So here's a female. Here's a female here also with a little, I guess you'd say, a bushing around it. This is the stop pin right here. And you'll see there's 3 screws total, all the same size. Okay? And then this last lanyard hole spacer right there. Now, on the Spyderco Sage 2, again, you have the same size screws across the knife. They're all the same size. Okay, and there's 3 screws. Well, including the pivot, just like the Sebenza. But stop pin on the Sage is actually a pin that sits into it. Now, the pin, in case people are wondering how strong the stop pin is on the Sage compared to a Sebenza, if I take the bushing off the Sebenza, it goes right onto the Sage, so they're exact same size. Just the Sebenza has that bushing which kind of protects the actual female, and this one is actually just a pin. Now, next difference is on the Sage, the pivot is a female and male, but the every other one is actually this, and it seems like this is a machined. This is actually the piece. This is the spacer that acts as also the female for both sides. So basically, on the Sage, rather than having just 3 females and 3 males, you have these spacers, these 2 spacers, plus the 2 screws that go on each side. So, and also to note, on also the pivot and these spacers, there is a notch on one side only. See, and it's on the lock side. So you have to fit it in, perfectly into that little space. That means then the actual thickness of this is again this this diameter, rather than just the screw size. So those are pretty nice, solid, a solid construction. And if you compare again to the Chris Reeve, since it is the same size, basically it's the same thing again as that bushing right there. See? So in terms of durability and rugged, how strong are the females, the diameter of the female screws on the Chris Reeve knife, to these little washer spacers, on the Sage, you have the same diameter of screws holding everything in place, because remember, these are nestled in. So these washers are nestled into both sides, while on the Sebenza, they're actually just spacers that float. Now in the Sebenza, I would say the construction is a little bit more complex. You have these, all these parts are here, these females plus the pivot, which is nice though because the pivot is the same size as these females that go in the other screws, so you can switch them around. There's that modular thinking, custom knife making right there. And but this washer is bigger, so this one goes back here, the little blue one. And then this bushing, the smaller one, goes here. And then you have the smaller washer, that goes, next to where the lock is. The washers, let's see, on a Sebenza have a milled they have holes drilled into them, milled out, and this holds the fluorinated grease inside that pivot area, which is a very nice feature. While on the Sage, you can see over there, there's 2 sizes for the Sebenza. On the Sage, they're identical washers, and they're not milled. So definitely not as smooth, but in terms of putting it together, you see, Sage is put directly. Now the Sage is an old-fashioned, then just basically female-male pivot to over tighten it, to tension changes, loosen it and the blade flicks out too easy. It does have that little notch in there to hold in place, so that's pretty good. That notch kind of helps not reduce the need for Loctite. Now on the Sebenza though, this is what makes the Sebenza so famous, is that little bushing, you see? Now this bushing is that, I guess you would say, probably the main thing about the Sebenza that's amazing, is that Chris Reeves puts that bushing. If you see, if I push it, you see, it fits exactly to where if I put one washer on this side, it holds it in place, and if I put it over the female, it holds that washer, and what it does is it creates a space, a perfect space between the two handles of the Sebenza, meaning then that you can tighten it down, but it won't affect the tension of this pivot. So basically you tighten down the pivot, and that bushing helps create a thickness that always lets the blade here move without being clamped down on by the two handles closing down on it from the screws. So you can see how it sits just perfectly. And then that's that Chris Reeve quality. That is machined perfectly to precise measurements. I mean, again, you see down there. Okay, so you can see that I had to cut the video just because the Sebenza's got a lot of parts. It's got a lot of little pieces to deal with, and I will say that it can be frustrating putting it back together. It's not the simplest task because everything's moving around, sliding around. There's all these separate spacers and stuff. Nothing stays in place. Now, unique thing to the Sebenza is it's flamed right here on the titanium lock bar, hardened just right there, so that it helps preserve that lockup area. Now, on the Sage, you can see all these little spacers are staying in place. That's good tolerances, good machining. If you screw in all these screws, it's very simple. Just tighten them down. And the washers don't move because they have the little notch. Now for the Sage though, if you look at the lock bar, now this is interesting. You can see here, the lock bar has this rough sandpaper texture on it. Now you can see where it's been worn off from use, but you can see everywhere else, and you can hear it. Here, I'll scratch it. You can hear this weird... Do you hear that? It's like this kind of almost sandpaper-like texture. The rest of the handle's got this smooth finish, and right there it's just very rough. Now the Sebenza doesn't do that, and the Sebenza unlocks smooth and locks smooth, and it's always good. I'm assuming it's just so that it doesn't, when it locks up, it doesn't overextend, and it kind of like grips it, and that's probably why it's taking a little while to break it in. But in terms of reconstructing a knife, Sage is a lot easier. With these all being the same, you just screw in the screws on this side. Everything stays in place. And then go ahead, put on the blade, put on the other washer, put on the other handle, screw all down, and you're done. Sebenza, not so easy because these aren't staying in place until you've screwed them in. So a little bit more complex than Sebenza. And so in that one, I say the Sage wins. The Sage, though, pivot isn't as fancy as the Sebenza, so the Sebenza wins in that one, and along with the washers too. And I think the lock bar too, being that flame, this one's not flamed, doesn't look flamed at all. That's definitely better for the preservation of that. It's easier on a Sebenza to switch the females over to the display side, like I've done now. Now, Chris Reeves knives, Sebenzas always come with tools for maintenance. I will say that through experience, Chris Reeves screws are very good quality. They never strip. In fact, you can see I just messed up. Look at my tool. It's the tool that's forming. You see? Not the screw. Screw's still perfect. Because Mr. Reeves definitely hardens his screws down. Now Spyderco, their screw quality is above average. Below obviously Mr. Reeves hardens quality screws, but there are some reviewers who have broken their screws or damaged them. But two knives, definitely I think a Sage is much easier to put together, and for me that means a lot when you're out and about. If something were to fall off, or just when you're maintaining every day, that simplicity, that ease of maintenance is always a plus. Now, if you visit a knife reviewer by the name of Ormoto, he's got some really good little series on a comparison between the Sage and the Sebenza, and in it he discusses some of the differences in terms of the design and just how the knife feels. He was also saying that the value of a Sage, you're not going to be upset when you buy a Sage at what you're getting for what the money you pay. Now, we'll note that a Sage, at least, is there's a couple unique features that a Sage provides that a Sebenza does not. For the final part of the Sage, let me see if I can take it back apart. All you have to do, you see, all those are held in place because they've already been screwed to. So all you have to do is just push this piece down on top, and the knife clicks into place like that, and then you just go ahead and screw them down. Now, the Sebenza is famous for that bushing, and that's what gives it that consistent tension when you tighten it down. And if you can see here, I've taken the female and pushed it all the way through to the other side. So you can tell that because there's no bushing, that then you would think when you tighten the Sage down, it's going to over tighten these two plates together and squeeze the blade, and then make the blade hard to open, like it would on a typical knife like a Strider. But that's why Spyderco, in a very smart move, added this stop pin right here that's nestled in. Because now, once you have that stop pin there, and it's nestled into both sides, you see? And all this is screwed down tight. You can screw this down as tight as you want. That stop pin keeps the space, just like the bushing does in the Sebenza, to where it accomplishes the same effect and allows the Sage to be smooth consistently also, and centered. Which is definitely now, that definitely makes it then function the same as a Sebenza, but in a more simpler way. Very ingenuitive, Spyderco. So, for closing comments on the Sage 2, it's a modest knife for modest people. It doesn't show in the pocket because the knife carries deep, and it's made for light cutting because it is a frame lock. And on the Sage 2, just like all frame locks, under hard use, if the tolerances aren't high, use it hard and the blade gets pushed back from cutting, you can overextend this lock bar like that, but you're always going to be wearing out that frame lock. That's that simple construction, but frame locks have that one. That's kind of like one of the trade-offs where that area is kind of like subjected to sort of a lot of wear. And because of the Sage, you can hear from my last example, it does that. It can wear this out quite soon. You see how far I just pushed it, practically the whole way, and it can get jammed. So let's see if I can do this right now. So I would say that this is meant for light cutting. Keep that in mind. It's not tactical because when your hands are wet, normally you grab on pocket clip to help you pull it out. This one's very loose, not much material to grab onto. Plus it's slippery, and because it is deep in your pocket, it's hard to. There's no area to catch like on the paramilitary. You can kind of grab it, an area sticking out. I actually carry it in my left pocket high, and then go in there and pull it out, and then flick it open with my middle finger. Definitely the construction more simple, easier to take apart and put together without all the pieces falling apart like on a Sebenza. But the Sebenza has one benefit in that the pivot is the same male and female as all the other two screws, so it's modular. But this one, these are machine parts. I mean, you think of roller skates, those parts last forever. Those bearings, this should have no problem either. Now also, if you see my finger, my nail, it's practically gone right there, almost went through, because these holes are not smoothed out. That's that Taiwan manufacturing, so keep that in mind. I smooth it out afterwards with a sharpening rod, ceramic rod. It's nice, fits in a small tin, so this is always handy. It's flat. It's all titanium, so of course the lockup is solid. If you're looking for something that's good as a compact knife that still gives you a good feeling of bulk because the blade is thick. But note that because this is missing and so is this can be disengaged. So I do not suggest it for tactical use. I mean, I can even unlock it, let's see, like that. And it definitely is not meant for tactical use. Even though it has the ergonomics